Yeah, it's Michael and Trey again, just back one time. We got a question as well from one of our listeners. The question is from Paul. Thank you for writing in. I don't know whether you're still listening. The timestamp seems to suggest it came in about half an hour ago. The question was about the age of the Earth and carbon dating. Trey, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay. Shall I take a little bit about the question, and then Trey, you go ahead. I'm not an expert on carbon dating. Just to sort of illustrate or quickly explain how this works, it's to do with organic material, and there are isotopes in organic material, and it's assumed that they halve over a certain period of time. So if you count certain isotopes, and I hope I'm explaining this correctly, please phone in or email in to correct me if it's not the case. And Trey, you as well, just when you come in, take over and correct me there. But the way I understand it is the isotopes are measured, and if it's a certain organic material, it's known, okay, there are so many isotopes of, I think it's radon or something, of a particular isotopes there. And then they look at the ones which are there, and then they can roughly calculate how old something is. Now, I understand, the scientific community is split up on that. I understand that this method is precise for a couple of 100 years. But once you go over 1,000 years, it becomes very sort of ad hoc. That's the way I understand it. So it's a bit of a problem. So if I've got something, because I need to assume that the half-lifetime of the isotopes is a constant, which is not necessarily the case, because atmospheric conditions, whatever, they do change, and hence it can be a problem. So I understand up to 500 years it's okay. Beyond that, there's quite a big number, sort of a big unknown in that. Again, I'm not an expert. It's just some stuff I've heard. Age of the Earth. A couple of theological, I'd say, and probably scientific community is just gonna laugh at me if I say that. I would say blatantly it's 6,000 years, based on the biblical account, and I believe that the Earth was created. So I don't believe in the gaps theory. I've got a couple of arguments as well, and my strongest argument I would come up with is the amount of moon dust. Bearing in mind the moon was created at the time of the Earth, there is a certain amount of cosmic dust which can be measured, and over the last 100 years there have been several attempts to measure the amount of cosmic dust falling on the Earth, and when you look at the dust which is on the moon, it tallies up with roughly about 6,000 years. I mean, you've all seen the moon pictures, man walking on the moon and a little bit of dust there. There are a lot of other aspects as well which seem to suggest that our solar system is very young. It's not millions or billions of years, but you're looking at thousands of years. If you assume it's billions of years old, you hit a lot of problems which can be explained, like for example the size of the sun, which would be vastly different. There are a couple of other anomalies in the solar system as well. There's in the asteroid belt. There are some effects which haven't taken place if the Earth would be, let's see, I'm trying to think for the name, pointing something effect. There's a video on edenradio.tv, it's the other way around, edenradio.tv. It's one video on the age of the Earth, where sort of I picked up some arguments from Ackerman and a few other guys, and was just narrating them. So please have a look there about the age of the Earth, and it should give you some information. Trey, back to you. What do you think?
Well, okay. One of the first things about dating, the primary way that you're going to find that they're dating stuff, particularly when they're dealing with things and they're saying, "Wow, this is millions and millions and millions of years old." There's no carbon dating in play in even making that statement at all. That's all based on belief that this is a geological strata or geological layer, and so we feel like because it's under this layer of the Earth, Now, the problems that you run into with dating that way, these are some of just the basic issues, is that, first of all, you find stuff all over the place underneath the ground. I was talking to a lady the other day that really sweet gal, and they've provided dinosaur bones to all sorts of places. Some of them actually museums that, particularly back in the 70s and 80s, she was telling me there was so much of this stuff. I mean, literally dinosaur bones sticking out of the ground. This is up in Colorado. That they wanted people to haul it off, and back then they'd give it up for free, if I understood her correctly. Now anymore, they charge for this stuff and this kind of thing, and they're more scrutinizing of who they give it to. My point is this: is that you were. I mean, she was telling me on the phone that she was finding firewood. I mean, literally intertwined with mass burials of dinosaur bones on her property. She would explain to the people that would come pick this stuff up. Now, this isn't millions of years old because it's intertwined with trees that, that are still burnable. A tree, if you've got a tree buried under the ground, or you've got a bunch of trees buried under the ground, tangled up with dinosaur bones and deer bones and whatever else you've got under there, and that wood is, if you can still make a fire with the wood that's under the ground, then the likelihood is it's not millions of years old. But that brings back to the dating question. So what the primary way that something would be dated, if they're saying, well, okay, so this thing is 60 million years old or 100 million years old, it's a guess. They're using a geological layer to date the fossil, or reversely, they're using the fossil to date the layer. And you can imagine what kind of problems this causes, particularly if in accounts like that woman there from Colorado, where you've got stuff all over the place, including dinosaur bones that are sticking right out of the ground, which, mind you, is generally how they find them. That's how you would know that it's there. It's less common that you're digging in the ground looking for dinosaurs without some reason to believe there might be a dinosaur under there. And that reason to believe would be that there was something on the surface that indicated that. So now when you're dealing with the carbon dating, just the carbon dating portion of the issue, there are lots of guys out there that'll point out lots of places where, things that were very young dated very old. And what I go to that's more compelling than that, because I do believe that the carbon dating can be used within reason for time periods. You could even stretch those for a few thousand years. But here's the challenges that you begin to run into with dating anything like that. If I'm looking for carbon levels, for example, and those levels are different in the past than they are today, and what we're looking for here is very, very minute trace amounts. So any tiny fractional trace amount of anything in any little variation, right, is going to make my numbers completely different than what they should be. So if those amounts were higher in the past than they are today, then by sheer virtue of that alone, that your number is wrong, and that it's going to be more wrong the further back in the past that you peer. Now, what would give us reason to believe that the oxygen levels were higher or that the carbon levels were higher? Well, you find air bubbles trapped in sap, just like on just like on Steven Spielberg's Jurassic Park, where they got the mosquito trapped in there. Well, there's some sense of reality to this. There really is tree sap that becomes fossilized, and you got little air bubbles in there, and these things have extremely high levels of oxygen that's trapped in there. I'm not certain what the carbon levels are, but I know what the oxygen levels are. And these two things, in some sense, should go pretty well hand in hand. What you are holding on to there is evidence that the environment was different. In this Nephilim video, one of the things that I pointed out was just the size and scope of the dinosaurs. See, you're dealing with accounts there in Genesis. It's talking about giants. And one of the things you're looking at on the ground, just in terms of fossils, without all your New York Times reports of, missing giant bones and this kind of thing, is that you're dealing with enormous animals. Animals that at bare minimum would have an incredibly difficult time living in the environment as it is today. They need an environment that is much more lush, much more rich, and needs different atmospheric conditions than we've got. And this becomes cut and dry when you're dealing with things like dragonflies. You've got these mammoth dragonfly fossils. These things have 2.5-foot wingspans. I understand these can range to 3 feet, but I can say with absolute confidence that you've got dragonflies that are fossilized with 2.5-foot long wingspans. A dragonfly takes in exactly the amount of oxygen that it needs to fly. So that mammoth, big, fat dragonfly that you're seeing in that fossil that is humongous in scope and would be terrifying if it were flying at you, that dragonfly could not lift off the ground today. It needs different atmospheric conditions, and yes, this is going to affect your dating. And one of the issues that you run into immediately when you're dealing with fossils is, why aren't there more of them? Why do things like dinosaurs appear instantaneously in the fossil record? You don't have dragonflies turning into dinosaurs. And you may laugh at that on the other side of this radio show, but I've actually seen diagrams showing that happen, coming out of the archaeological community. So show me a fossil of a dragonfly turning into a dinosaur. I mean, it looks great on a cartoon graphic that's promoting evolution. Show me monkeys turning into people. Right? They've got one bone, they've got one fossil that they call Lucy. Now, this thing was found in 1967. Notice how it's missing both of its hands and both of its feet. This is the little bone structure, right? Little 3.5-foot monkey. And they would prance around, and they would. Now, of course, today we've DNA tested it, so there's no argument even from them that it's not a small monkey. But this was, mind you, hold on here. It's a monkey becoming a person. Well, here's a dirty little secret for you. We found more than 40 of them at this point. Big surprise. In the middle of Africa, we managed to find monkey bones. What a shock, huh? And some of them have the little hands and the little feet. So back in the late 1960s, early 70s, when they were drawing up Lucy, and it's got little human hands and little human feet, well, I guess we all know now that that's not true. And one of their arguments there is, oh, no, Lucy's different from those other bones because it's got a different kneecap on it. Well, then you start poking around to look at that. Well, let's take a look at kneecaps then, because this is our evidence for evolution, right? This is our fossil evidence on the entire face of the planet Earth for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years worth of bones that should exist. We've got one dead monkey in the middle of Africa. Okay, fine. Let's look more at our dead monkey. The knee bone came from a mile away. And I'm not making that up just because I think it's ridiculous. That's actually true, or maybe it's 1 kilometer. You can go online and look it up. But it came from a significant difference away. And this is supposed to be science to me. This is how we're dating things. This is how we're putting together our reconstructions. I got a no hands, no feet, dead monkey with a kneecap that came from a mile away. And this in the middle of Africa. And this is science. And I've got this in a golden box like the light of the glory of God should come out. Because this is our evidence for millions of years of transitions. You've got to be absolutely out of your mind. And this problem exists with every single fossil type that you've got on the planet Earth. Whether you're dealing with, now all of your animals have got subtypes. You've got all sorts of types of dogs. And this should not be terribly surprising in any way, shape, form, or fashion, because we are in the year 2013 working on the year 2014. It's not like we started working with genetics yesterday. So what we do know is that within inside the genome, you've got body plans for these creatures. And some of this is basic stuff. A dog does not have the same body plan as a whale. That's observable. It should not come as terribly surprising that within that genome, there's actual coding that is constructing that dog. And there is limitations to what that coding can build. It can make a big dog. It can make a small dog. It can make a fluffy dog. It can make a short-haired dog. It can make a dog with a long-tailed dog with a short tail. It can make a Chihuahua. It can make a Great Dane. But what it cannot make is a turtle. Right? Turtle code is so all of these different things. So here I've got this theory where I've got all of this artwork displaying to me that things are turning into other things, and there should be this whole planet. If there were millions of years worth of worth of evolution, you should be able to sink a shovel in the ground and start pulling out weird stuff. It's simply not there. And this is a big question. This runs you right into what Michael was bringing up a second ago. That now I can't tell you what the age of the Earth is. I have no idea. I've heard, like Michael, I tell you this. I agree with the biblical text. So what I mean by that statement is that I don't know whether the gap theory is true. I don't know. I wasn't present.
Trey, quickly, what is the gap theory for those of our listeners who don't know what the theory is all about?
Well, you got there at the opening of Genesis. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That's an all-encompassing statement right there. So whether or not you believe in the gap theory, or whether or not you believe that the earth is 6 or 7 or 8,000 years old, neither one of these that you believe, if you've committed to that opening line of Genesis, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. To me, you've got it covered. For me, that's sufficient. I don't know the precise day and date that God did there. I do not know how old it precisely is.
Just to reiterate,
there's significant reason to believe it's quite young.
Some people would come along and they would say, okay, God has created the Earth, and because the geologists say the Earth is really, really old because of geological records, and therefore we can reconcile it. And I think this is where the gap theory came up, where people say, yeah, the Earth can be millions of years old, but creation, this is the next point. When you look at creation itself, where man was created, that was done 6,000 years ago, according to the biblical record. There's an interesting thing as well. There used to be an island freshly created just off Iceland. It's a really, really interesting story, and there were just some volcanoes that were going a bit crazy, and suddenly out of the sea you had an island which wasn't there before. Before it was just water, and suddenly you had an island, and quite big as well, enough to for vegetation to grow, and for some mammals. I think that they found some mammals later on to live on the island. And so some scientists, they took some rocks from the island which were clearly lava just a few years ago, and then solidified, turned into rock. They had them tested by geologists, and they came up with the typical scenario, umpteen million years old. And yet you knew that this rock was maybe 20 years old, or at least before 20 years it was a piece of lava. So I thought it was quite funny in the sense that when you look at dating rocks and the methodology they use to date rocks scientifically, that it not always works out quite right, and that there are a lot of problems in the way they approach science. Now, it's like you say, Trey, it doesn't really matter whether the Earth is geologically is older, whether the gap theory is right, or the Earth was created if you follow the biblical record, 6,000 years ago.
Well, in the gap theory, and that gap theory doesn't necessarily. Michael, I believe that it's young, and I've just looked at it too long to not believe that. So when you hear me say, and that doesn't necessarily make me right, but I'll tell you this, that the evidence is substantial, and these arguments that we carbon, if I found a dinosaur bone, 2 feet under the ground or 20 feet under the ground, so that means that this means this and this means this. See, those arguments start wearing real thin to me in light of other stuff. It's not that I toss those to the wayside. I'm just telling you, man, that you start really looking at this, and what you're missing is very telling in arguing these enormous time frames. But in scope of the, in a sense of the gap theory, that doesn't just necessarily apply to the Earth. You've got an opening statement of Genesis. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. See, that's an all-encompassing statement. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God hovered on the waters. I think that's verbatim what it says. I don't know when the angels were created. I don't know what other things have gone on. I don't, I don't know those answers, and that's why I'm not going to commit to those. But I will commit to this: that they're, the timelines that they're showing you for things like evolution not only conflict with every single written record on the entire face of the planet Earth, but also do conflict with the geological and physical evidence that you find in almost everything from the cells to the stars. And you have to use more than one data point when you're dating something. So a lot of this science that's getting fed to you when they say, well, we carbon dated something and it came out to be this. See, what I like hearing are people that have dates for things where they've used 2 or 3 or 4 data points. And none of the people pitching me evolution have that to give. And mind you, there's never been more fraud committed for the furtherance of a single science idea from Piltdown Man, right? Piltdown Man lasted for 30 years. 30 years, and that's what got evolution into the school systems, was Piltdown Man. And then at the end they admit, oh, okay, it turns out it was a fraud. See, so that was a Jesuit priest running loose with a guy that had made a bunch of fraud fossils, but the only fraud fossil that he had made that took anybody's interest was the missing link Piltdown Man thing, right? That turns out to be a fraud. How many of those have we had? How many of them? And the best evidence we've got in the fossil record to excuse millions of years is that we found a big lizard underground. And I could get off of this radio show right now and make at least 3 phone calls to people that live on property where they got dinosaurs on their property. There's a guy with a dinosaur museum right down the street from me the other day. I'm in there, I'm talking to him, and this is Trey. And I said, now you're aware these things aren't millions of years. He said, oh yeah, well, we know that. We actually found, the bones in our museum, actually come from here on the property. And he starts walking me through the same kind of reasons that I'm giving you here why he knows that. I said, well, why are they labeled millions of years? He chuckles at, well, I mean, that's what the big boys say. That's what the big boys say, and that's what they, expect us to put on the thing. I'm not making this up. And I would highly, the thing that really scares these people is when somebody starts asking these kind of questions about their stuff. Because it all looks real good until you start asking questions about it. It all sounds real strong.
It's a bit bizarre. I mean, if you find a dinosaur bone just a couple of inches below the soil, which is not properly fossilized, that with erosion and everything else, after thousands of years, it would just disintegrate and disappear. There is a book by Paul Ackerman, and I just pulled it up here, and it's called "It's a Young Earth After All." You can get it. I'm just trying to think where I got it from. I was reading it online. I'm not quite sure. I don't remember where I got it from. But if you Google it, I'm sure you can find an ebook version of the book. There are a couple of things about a young Earth which seems to suggest it. I mentioned the cosmic dust before. Experiments were done. Did a PowerPoint some time ago, and I'm just going through the PowerPoint here. The first experiments were done in the 50s, I think. Yeah, if I got it right. And no, it goes a bit further back than that. Let's have a look. I've got it somewhere here.
Well, it's
57. That was when the research started, and it was with the aim, to put a man on the moon, because at 6.5 billion years, they knew there would be many meters of dust, cosmic dust, fine cosmic dust on the moon. And they were worried that the landing craft would just potentially disappear in the lunar dust, especially with the thruster still going as the landing craft is coming down. Anyway, it didn't happen. There was a bit of dust, and you can see it. It sort of was flickering about, and then it settled down on the ground, and it wasn't a big problem. I'm just looking. There's some other stuff as well, which is quite interesting. You've got the meteor clock, where you look at meteor bombardment on the Earth, and when you look at meteors in the sediments, yeah, I mean, roughly, okay, we get umpteen meteors in a year, or in a period of 100 years. Roughly the number of meteors which come down on Earth. Now, when you go through the fossil records and through the different layers, it's quite interesting. One thing they found is they haven't found any meteors. Yeah, and if the theory is correct that each little fossil layer is 100,000 years old, you should find quite a few meteors there, but you hardly find any at all. Yeah, which seems to suggest that all these fossilized layers were created in a very short period of time and not over millions of years, but maybe I mean a creationist would say it's a flood, isn't it, with a cosmic event which took place where a big catastrophe happened on the Earth, and then you got animals trapped in these layers getting fossilized in a very short period of time.
Here's the real truth, Michael. Once we get past, once we kick the nonsense aside, because the top layers of the Earth are littered with all sorts of, they're littered with animal bones, they're littered with trees, they're littered with all sorts. That's just surface level stuff. And the truth is, we really don't know what's down there underneath the ground, and we wouldn't know where to and we wouldn't know where to look. And I can tell you that there have been a lot of expeditions that really, things that I'm actually currently researching and looking into. Some of them may be wild goose chases, but I'm highly interested. I mean, the Nazis ran guys all over the place, all sorts of interesting and unique places, looking for stuff under the ice in Antarctica. So, and I'm not telling you there's anything there. I'm just telling you that they seem like they believed that there was. And I'd be interested to know why. And the truth is, we really don't know. If you're dealing with a time period prior to that flood that was 1,000 years at least or better, you're dealing with, and I'll tell you something about the skulls, the Neanderthal skulls that I've been learning about. The further back you go in time, the more you find that our brain sizes were larger. And you are indeed, when you look at the ancient past, you are looking at architectural structures that have people so baffled that their only explanation is that aliens must have done it. Because there's no way the people could have been, these were monkey people back then, right? There's no way they could have built pyramids.
Yeah.
When we look, and that's just stuff. That's just after the flood stuff. One can only imagine what there might be underneath the ground if we knew where to look.
True. One more effect, and let me just mention this. I mentioned the Poynting effect before. I couldn't remember the second name. It's Poynting Robertson. They're the two guys who have found this effect, and it's an effect to do with things in orbit. And what you find is you've got small particles emitted from the sun, and it's got an impact on satellites and smaller satellites, and it's in direct correlation to the mass of an orbiting object, something which orbits around the sun, and the impact. So the smaller the mass is, so the smaller the object is, the more impact the solar wind has on the object. So that means smaller particles will slow down in their orbit, and so they'll get closer to the sun, and bigger particles will stay behind. And they call it's a solar janitor effect. Now, there are a couple of interesting things. We've got the rings around Saturn, and all the scientists, before they got to see the rings for real, they thought that they should be very stable, they shouldn't change at all. And, all the small particles should be on the inside, and the bigger particle should be on the on the edge of the ring. Anyway, when they went there, it's not the case. It's just total chaos. Yeah, they are not stable. The rings aren't stabilized around Saturn, and you've got small particles on the outside, on the outer edge, and big particles or big things, rocks on the inner edge. It doesn't make sense. Asteroid belt is the next one, which goes around the sun, and Again, at 6.5 billion years, you can almost run calculations. It should have sorted itself out, that you should have like a nice order with the bigger chunky rocks being further away from the sun and the smaller particles being closer to the sun in the asteroid belt. You go to the asteroid belt, and they've been through it with some probes to have a look at them, and it's just not the case. This is really bizarre. It's just not the case. There's no order in the asteroid belts, so smaller particles are all over the place, bigger particles or bigger chunks are all over the place as well. So even though the Poynting-Robertson effect is measurable, and you've got it with satellites and other objects in space where solar wind impacts it all the time, it's not visible. It's not visible in our solar bodies. The last solar sort of anomaly which keeps everybody baffled is the moon Io around Jupiter with a volcano. And I mean, they say, oh, it's to do with the gravitational pull. Doesn't make sense. Why aren't the other moons affected by gravitational pull? Why is it just Io that's got a volcano spewing out big stuff all the time? And again, it's one of those anomalies which do not make sense. If the universe is old, 6.5 billion years, like the moon, all the other moons, like our moon, all the other moons around the planets, should all be cold and shouldn't be geologically active. And yet many are cold, but one isn't. Doesn't add up. Did he join the solar system later? And it's no sense, no point at all, if you assume that evolution is correct and that the ideas which are propagated from evolution are correct. If you believe in creation, it's not a problem, because God could have created it geologically active and is still active, maybe less so than 6,000 years ago, or God could have created, like our moon, geologically inactive. And saying that, I think there are small tremors on the moon, aren't there? So there's a little bit of activity still going on. I'm not sure. I've heard some stuff some time ago. Trey, back to you, and then I think time is quite late now, isn't it?
Well, these things, here's part of the further back that you look in time, the more hazy things go, and that's just the reality of it. And there really should be, if there were enormous amounts of, at bare minimum, if there were enormous amounts of time of animals and us being here on this planet, it's just a bare minimum, not even dealing with the age of the Earth or anything like that. But if there were long periods of time of that, there really should be evidence of that, and that is a desperate problem. And there is a scarcity of there should be wells of bones down there that are just so vast in amounts. There should be wealths of fossils that are so much beyond what we find. And you should also most certainly find the transition. I mean, in millions of bones that we found in terms of human bones and in monkey bones, right? And that's just one species. That's just one thing turning into another thing. You would need this for every single animal, by the way. But just in that one little example, out of millions of bones we found, the best thing we've got is a set of monkey bones without its hands and feet. That's not. I mean, that's troubling. That's what I'm saying. Is that, yes, the stuff is the questions are larger than the answers, and also the very nature of reality itself. See, we're assuming time. We're assuming light moves at a certain speed, right? And that's, those have come from fringe arguments back in the 1970s to being nearly what would be an across-the-board reality today, that the speed of light has not been constant over time. When you're looking at quantum particles and you see quantum entanglement, what this means is that two particles that can be separated by light years are connected to one another. Right. What this implies is that distance is synthetic. Light could quite literally move instantaneously at its inception. But I mean, the truth is, none of us really have the answers or the exact details to these things. But the evidence is significant, and
also the lack of evidence, I think, is also quite significant. I mean, there are a lot of ideas from the other side, from the evolutionists, and yet there's very little to back it up. And it's just like I heard somebody say it's an assumption proven by another assumption, which
you're
creates
making
another assumption.
Yeah, you're making guesses built on guesses, built on guesses, built on guesses, until finally you're way out here in some weird ball field. And what really kills, let me just cut the jugular here. What really kills the evolution thing, and what will kill it in the long run, is not how many fossils you've got buried in the dirt. It's not how much moon dust that you've got on the moon. The thing that will, these are all strong and valid complaints. But see, you can argue these until you're blue in the face, and it's just a he said, she said. The thing that really injures it, in my opinion, is going to be the genetics. You're living in an age where we're able to actually look at that you are in fact comprised of programming code. These are not little balls of gloppy, gelatin or little goo. It's actual programming code. Each strand, light years more sophisticated than every single computer program written by mankind since the birth of the computer. You've got roughly 4 trillion of these in your body just to make the programming that equals you work. All of these little parts have to fit together perfectly, and that's why it requires precision programming to construct you at your inception. Whoever you are listening to this show, and you're fundamentally separated. I don't care what anybody tells you or what a science book says. You are fundamentally separated from every single quote-unquote animal on this planet, not just in your intellectual capacities, which are light years above any kind of monkey. In fact, the monkey's not even a good example, because there are much smarter creatures than monkeys on the planet Earth. Some could argue, I've seen dogs that are smarter than monkeys. The monkey just has some apparatus that it can do some extra cool things. There are a ton of animals on this planet that are incredibly bright in a variety of different ways. In fact, the ways that they're bright are usually identical to the tasks that they need to perform in the wild. It's programmed right in, whether you're dealing with a dolphin, a dog, or a monkey, or anything in between. They're all doing things that are absolutely astounding if you were to stop and watch any single one of them. My point is this, is that you are separated from those. It is my extremely strong opinion that you were never, nor were any of your ancestors, a product of monkeys getting hot and sweaty and doing whatever monkeys may do. Okay.
I agree.
The genetics are the killer for it, and it is what it is.
I've heard some bizarre stuff. If you look at genetics, that apparently a pig is closer related to man than a monkey, and that would make it quite interesting.
Right.
But again, the main point is that the transition from one species to another is just nothing there, is there? It's just no evidence whatsoever. Where you get subspecies in the sense that you get like hybrids and things like that, which tend to be sterile, but you never get a transition from one distinct species to another distinct species. So you never get any evidence from. You get evidence about horses having different sizes, different breeds, and so on. But a dog's never turned into a horse, or a wolf has never turned into a horse, or a giraffe has never turned into a horse, or a horse has never turned into a giraffe. There's nothing in between any of those animals, and this is a big problem, isn't it?
Yes, it is, and here's the bottom line: is that your ancient texts are telling you the truth. and it's not by accident either that your Hebrew texts are terribly precise. In fact, the codings, when you get into looking at these biblical codes and these other kind of things, you're probably going to begin to discover, you could even get lost in that, because you're going to begin to discover that these texts are not only precise, but they also have dimensional aspects to them, where there are guys that make a very strong case that there are those pages not only read with precision just on their surface value, but in other respects are able to predict actual world events. I won't get into that, but what I will tell you is that I do not believe that it's by accident that the texts that you're holding are accurate. They are accurate to what I would argue is a T. In fact, so precise when you're dealing with those Hebrew texts that every word can be of critical significance. And it's not just what's said, it's also what's not said. But even your pagan cultures, your occult religions, and these other kind of cultures, these are supportive of those very same documents. They're telling very similar stories. And they're in fact doing the best they can to relay those stories to you. But you have to, when you're looking at Egyptian, for example, or Sumerian, you have to look, it's not that they're just making up mythology because today they just had lots of spare time on their hands. They're trying to tell you a story that they understand in the best way that they know how, and that the best way that they perceive it. But their things are going to come out ramblesome, so you have to look at it more as an overview. Take a look at their text and you'll see what I'm saying. There's a night and day difference between a Sumerian text and a Hebrew text. But what I am telling you is that they're all telling you the same story, and they really are. They're trying to, in their own ways, and the text that has the most precision, are the texts that we call today the Holy Bible, and it's not by accident. Nothing here is by accident. When a person comes to realize that, that's just where it becomes fun, that you realize that none of it's an accident. It's not just the DNA. It's not just that you weren't a monkey. Your life, your day-to-day life is not an accident. And you're walking through all sorts of little scenarios and things, so your life is full of all these little props that you're going to make decisions on as you walk through. And those pages are identical to that. Those pages are telling you a precision story. They are predicting the future in advance. That's just on their surface level, so they shouldn't do that. Okay? If the source of that information were from inside the place, they should not be able to accurately predict history with 100% precision. They should not be able to do that. And there are many, many examples of that. In fact, the whole book's littered with those. But when I say many, many examples, I mean examples where you can document that what was written in prophecy was not done after the fact. Right? So you've got that. So that part's unarguable. Right? This is full of, this is full of writers who you would definitely want at a casino with you if you believe this is all luck and chance.
I find it very amazing because when you look at the Bible, this is, by the way, it's just guesswork, and now I heard some figure once that there are about 400 prophecies about Christ. Some people say much more than that, about 600-700, which directly relate to Jesus Christ. It probably depends how far you go, but I guess I would say there are probably about 1,000 prophecies relating to events in the future in the Bible, depending how you count them. But there's an awful lot. There are many, many prophecies in there, and all of them have come true, which is a very, very good rate as far as precision goes. Brings us to another point as well, but we have to tackle it some other time. It's the end time as well. So there's a lot of prophecy which is still outstanding to be fulfilled, and the scary thing is, if the rest has all been fulfilled, and if the hit rate is 10 out of 10, then the remaining prophecies which are still outstanding, you can guarantee that they'll be fulfilled as well. And some of the stuff is quite scary as well.
Yeah, I'd like to go over some of that on the one of these videos that I'm planning to pump out has quite a bit of that in it. What is not, what is left remaining, and this really paints a very crystal clear picture of where we're at. If you can look at that in black and white, and examine what has been done and what hasn't been done, it'll give you shivers.
Yeah, it's quite amazing. I think one of the events which are quite interestingly described in the Bible, but again, it's another aspect. It's quite late here in England. I know, Trey in Texas. For you, it's pasta time, isn't it? You need to eat your pasta. You're looking forward to that. You haven't had your lunch yet, but one of the main events or key events which was prophesied in the Bible is the return of the Jewish people to the homeland, to Israel, which started in the late 1800s, and then mid 1900s the state of Israel was proclaimed, and some prophecies are quite literal, talking about silver birds bringing in the people from afar, and true, they came in by plane and they started resettling the land. So it's quite fascinating when you look at that, but there's a lot more to come as well. Okay, Paul Smith, I'm not sure whether you're still listening. I
am.
No, you're Trey Smith. That's Paul who asked the question. Yeah. Oh. You've forgotten your name. If you are listening, thank you very much for the question. Please feel free to ask more questions, or if you have a question as well. We won't be able to answer them today, but we'll do it some other time. The talk is going to be on YouTube as well. We're going to stick it up, the evolution bit, in the next couple of days, so you can go through the talk again. The information, there's a lot of interesting information on the net about the age of the Earth, and a lot of work has been done by a guy called Paul Ackerman. I'm just going to spell his last name. It's Ackerman. Paul Ackerman. And he has written this book, It's a Young Earth After All. Lots of information in there. Not quite complete. There's a lot more research has been done. He's written the book about 20 years ago. Since then, a lot more research has been done by creationists, and they came up with a lot more information. Now, I know Trey has got a video about evolution on his YouTube channel. What's it called? It's 100 things to disprove Darwinism or something?
It's something like that. It's sure a bunch of them. Just evolution, modern myth, and it'll mainly focus on the genetic stuff and I think that the genetic stuff, if you're someone out there that's no matter who you are that's out there listening, you owe it to yourself to look at what the stuff is. What I tried to do in that video was give you easy stuff that if you were in a dialogue, you'd be able to say, very easily toss something out that would be very difficult for your best cast of PhDs to overcome. Okay. That's what I wanted to arm you with, was little bitty nuggets, and so many of them that you can take your pick for which one you want to destroy their evolution thing with. That's sort of the idea.
Yeah, if you go to EdenRadio.tv, there's also I think there are 2 videos on there, and one video is just a PowerPoint presentation summing up what Paul Ackerman, what he has gone through. Okay, right. That's it for today. I'll blend in some music. Trey, thank you very much for your time and for 1 more hour to come here on air and to answer this question. And Paul, thank you very much for writing in this question as well. Okay, God bless and bye-bye from Michael and from Trey.